Hey, 8 Push Classroom. This is Mrs. Parlier. I'm just here to give you a little bit of some tips for how you're going to approach your DBQ project with Mrs. Mueller. And just wanted to talk a little bit about primary resources, but then also a little bit of searching strategies that you might find useful to use, not just for this class, but for any class, just so you understand some basic workings for how our search engines actually work. Just a couple words about the primary resource project you have going on. And you're going to see then there's a series of videos that follow after this that will explain all of the different resources we have available to us on our Dominican Online Resources website. So I'll go into those in more depth. But right now, a couple words about my assumptions that I had before I made those videos. The first is that you have narrowed down the time period you're working within. The second is that you have a basic understanding of that subject or the theme that you have in mind, whether it's about the factory conditions, post-Civil War, minstrel shows, whatever it is that you've chosen as the basis of your DBQ. I'm coming from an understanding that you already know something about it. Because the idea then is that these primary resources, you're not using them necessarily to inform what you know. They're being used as an impact to demonstrate that at that point in time, that these resources are pointing to, these primary resources are kind of solidifying what you already know. I always thinking about seeing is believing. So anytime we can have that firsthand account, you think of those interviews with World War II veterans and the opportunity to be able to speak face to face with someone who experienced something or to read that firsthand account. That's when history comes alive and we have that unfiltered look at what was happening at that point in time that you don't get when you try to then filter things 50 years later and we can look back and we have the benefit of knowing more or seeing how things unfold. So the beauty of a primary source is it's a snapshot at that point in time before you knew what was going to happen after. And so that's what's really powerful about it. So firsthand accounts, I cannot stress enough the importance that we have access to those. And so what I'm going to be showing you today is how you can unlock those and find what you want. Because primary sources, unlike say magazines that are then indexed by catalogers or indexers on online resources like Gale and Context High School. Those then have been tagged with subject headings that allow you to much more easily locate the information you want or to find things that are similar. There has been metadata tagging put on our primary resources, but the initial finding of them, a lot of it has to be done based on a lot of keyword searching because you're combing through PDFs in a lot of cases to try to find what you're looking for. So it's just a little different strategy. It can be a little frustrating, but it's really kind of exciting. So I'm going to be showing you a couple search strategies just so that you have something in mind. And really, there's search strategies I would recommend you use even if you're approaching something like Google. We love to Google things, but you can get a lot of it's not good to get a million hits on Google because there's a lot of junk in there. So I'm going to show you some strategies for how you can really pinpoint what it is you want to get, and we'll go from there. The other assumption I was making is that you have already created a folder for your project in OneDrive. I cannot stress enough the importance of making a central location for you to put all of your materials, so that later on you don't go, oh, where did I leave that? No, it's all in the one folder. So I'm going to suggest you have an 8Push folder, and now you have a DBQ project folder within that, so that when I show you in these subsequent videos using the different resources, how you're going to get them into that folder, okay? So here's a few words now. I'm going to show you. This actually comes from the University of Whitewater. So I'm going to turn off my webcam because I don't like being on camera. All right, so now you can hear me. This is from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. They did a really nice job. There is this concept of Boolean operators. If any of you remember from grade school, and you probably see it now, the idea of the Venn diagram, the difference between and, or, and not. You know, so if you do cats and dogs, you're finding this little slice right here, where you find something that talks about both cats and dogs. If you want to broaden things, you use or. So if you say cats or dogs, that's going to find just cats, it's going to find just dogs, and it's going to find cats or dogs in that little place too. Okay, so that's a broader search than this narrow one to start with. Then there's always the negating. So maybe you're saying, I want cats, but I don't want dogs. So if you do cats, not dogs, it's only going to find this section of cats. It's going to eliminate anything that's mentioned dogs. Now that seems very basic, but I'm telling you this and or not lays the foundation for all of the way that we have set up our online searches, our databases operate on this. So the power of using and or not, I cannot overstate that. All right. So when you have more than one keyword in your search, you want to use those connectors because they're really going to help you narrow. So for example, and I like this little infographic they have for and, when you use and, all of your keywords are included in the search. This will decrease your search results. So if you just do video games, you're going to end up with this 18,000 results. If you add video games and teenagers, you're going to get 547 results. I want you to pay attention to these little quotation marks. We're going to talk about that in a minute as well. But you can see by adding that and, you've instantly made this a much more manageable list. All right. If you're using or, a lot of times you're using that because there might be synonyms, words that you need to include because you want to catch every possibility. So you could have teenagers, right? You get this 105,000 hits. But if you add teenagers or adolescents, it's now doubled that, actually more than doubled it. So you want to use or when you have synonyms, or related terms, okay, to broaden it out. That's going to be able to allow you to catch all the different ways someone might refer to that group. You could add young adults. You could add preteens. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you could describe teenagers or adolescents. All right. And then there's not. Words that follow not. So you want the ones that are before the not. If you say not, then you want to exclude that. So again, you've got this video games, but what if you don't want violence talked about in the video games? It's kind of interesting to me that you have video games, right, with 18,000 results. And if you say, well, I don't really want to talk about violence within video games, it only brought it down to 17,000. So that should be a tip off that we spend a lot of time talking about violence in video games. But hey, that's just something to notice. So and or not. If you add these Boolean operators, these connecting words into your searches in Google, you're going to get much more focused results. And no one wants to see a million hits. Believe me, I don't want to read all that. All right, couple other tips to know when you're doing your searching is that you can do what's called truncation. It's a little wild card. So you can see, say you're not sure if you want game, gaming, gamification, gamers. If you do GAM and then put this asterisk for a wild card, that is going to allow you to find results that cover all of those, okay? The only thing I want to point out here, and they do this, is that you got to be careful with truncation because in the example below, the search could also result in gamble, gamut, gambit. It's going to pull anything that has GAM with the asterisk, okay? So this is taking the root word, but sometimes it's valuable to do that because you might not sure, do I want it plural or don't want it plural? So it can be powerful, but don't be shocked if you find things that were not what you were looking for. This is the other thing that I think people need to really, really think about. Remember I mentioned the video games. If I go into Google or wherever and I just search video games, it is looking for video, it is looking for games, and it is looking for video games. Anywhere within that document or that site or however it's pulling, you're going to end up with this 307,000 results. Using quotation marks forces this to be searching just for video games as a phrase together. And suddenly you're down to only 18,000 results. I'm not even sure what they were searching when they did this, but the power of using those quotation marks locks in that I want these words in this order to appear in this document for you to even show it to me. If they do not have video games next to each other, I don't even want to see it. This is going to be really important when you are doing your primary resource searching, because anytime you can find a specific event, a specific date, someone's name, a specific document, if you throw it in those quotation marks, it's going to be able to find that so much more easily. You're not going to have to search looking for it. I'm going to say if you just typed it in without the quotation marks, any good search engine should automatically put the things that put those words together, or at least in close proximity, those should rise to the top. But you also got to figure in the Google world that there are people that are paying ads to get their stuff to go further to the top. So the best way for you to handle these things is to put them in quotation marks, and that really will allow you to say, I really want this phrase kept together. And you're going to find with those primary sources, or like say there was a factory fire, as much as you can keep words together in a line, especially searching newspapers, you're going to find, if you're talking about a specific factory, JP Morgan, anytime you can nest those in a quotation mark, your results are going to be that much more specific and good. You can always dial it back if you're not finding enough stuff, but I would say start there and see what you get. And then there's a power within, and they're showing you, like in Academic Search Complete, there is the ability for you to do advanced searches where they will allow you then to say, okay, I want them to be in specific fields. Do you see this and or not? So you can, within a lot of search engines, utilize the ands and nots and the ors. They'll pull that out for you to use. In the primary resources I'm going to be showing you, it's not going to be you're not going to have that ability to do it that way. But if you are in BadgerLink using academic search, I know some people think those are clunky databases, but the ability to do these more complicated searches will really help focus the materials you're going to get. All right, so you'll see that you can click on their advanced searching, and then they'll show you how to pull those pieces out. But you can also do a combination of ands or ors. So you're seeing what they're trying to do is they're saying, okay, I want teen, but I want like teenagers, teenager, and or adolescent or young adult, right? They want those phrases together, and then those are further nested. I want any of these and video games, but not violence. So you see how they've pieced this together? You can type this search into Google, and you're going to find your search is much more focused than if you just went into teenage video games and violence. That's going to get you a much broader search than you would be getting from this sort of combination. So pay attention to those Boolean operators. Use those because they are really going to be useful for you for any research you're doing for any class. All right, that is enough about my tips about research. And signing off of this section, we're going to move on to looking at some specific resources.